Tennessee has several noteworthy new laws. Some are controversial and some are like, why didn't we think of that sooner? Since I'm a realtor, I'd like to start with squatters' rights. In Tennessee, squatters do not have rights to other people's property. In places like New York and California, it can take years to evict a squatter. In Tennessee, the property owner files a complaint with the sheriff's department and the intruders can be removed within 72 hours. If you have a car that looks like this, or this, it's against the law in Tennessee. If the front fenders are 4 inches or more higher than the back fenders, there's concern that the driver won't be able to properly see over the dashboard. So Carolina squat is against the law in Tennessee. Tennessee does not like bullies. A new law makes bullying and cyberbullying offenses subject to the same penalties as harassment. So don't think there's nothing you can do about it. Here's one that sounds good but hard to enforce. It's the Protecting Minors from Social Media Act. Starting next year, social media companies like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok will have to get parental permission from minors to access their services. The bill will also require social media companies to provide parents a means by which they may supervise the minor's account, including options for the parent to view privacy settings, set daily time restrictions, and implement breaks during which time the minor cannot access the account. Isn't there an app for that? Next, there's one you probably haven't heard of. The Vaccinated lettuce bill. We're just getting started. I'm Leslie Davison, a Nashville area realtor with Epic Realty. On this channel, I talk about Nashville and the surrounding areas. Like and subscribe for more. Back to the vaccinated lettuce bill. Researchers are toying around with the idea of distributing vaccines in food. The bill will require food containing vaccines to be labeled as such so that people know what the dosages are. Currently, no such food is available in stores, but Tennessee legislators want to be proactive. One controversial bill bans chemtrails. It prohibits the distribution of airborne chemicals affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of sunlight. Everything that goes up must come down. Those chemicals that we knowingly and willingly inject into the atmosphere simply to control the weather or climate are affecting our health, says Representative Monty Fritz. The controversy is some Tennessee lawmakers speculated about a federal government plot to engage in climate experiments. Weather modification through cloud seeding has been going on for a long time, so it's not unheard of. Although the Tennessee bill appears to be the first of its kind to pass a state legislature, lawmakers in several other states, including Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Kentucky, Tennessee, and New Hampshire, have introduced similar legislation. John Ray Clemens, who was opposed to the legislation and thought it was ridiculous, introduced an amendment to protect Bigfoot while they were at it. Tennessee is cracking down on cell phone use while driving. For drivers under 18, the second offense would result in 7 points added to their driving record, which means they must attend an administrative hearing or risk having their license suspended. An adult gets 4, then 5 points, and their license is at risk with 12 points or more. By the way, it's called the Eddie Conrad Act after a Lebanon business owner who was killed in a car crash. Have you seen social media posts where children or parents read to the school boards sexually explicit content found in the school's library? Tennessee already has restrictions on materials allowed in books. The law explicitly bars materials that contain nudity, sexual excitement, sexual conduct, or excess violence. It also said materials should not appeal to the prurient interest, a term that faced many intense debates in the legislative session. They recently added that the books should be suitable for the age and maturity levels of the students, so there could possibly be more books banned, at least in the schools. Local officers in Tennessee are required to help federal immigration authorities. Governor Bill Lee signed a law that requires local law enforcement agencies to communicate with federal immigration authorities if they discover a person who is in the country illegally. The law mandates cooperation in identifying, detaining, and deporting undocumented immigrants. The bill's sponsor said it's not meant to encourage officers to explicitly gather papers from people they suspect to be in the country illegally. He said it is meant to apply when law enforcement officers learn a person's immigration status, probably during the commission of a different crime. A Nashville police spokesman has said that the proposal could erode the trust its officers have built with immigrant communities and dissuade some victims or witnesses from cooperating with investigations. Tennessee is one of 29 constitutional carry states, which means individuals who don't have DUIs no longer need a gun permit to carry a handgun, whether concealed or open. Honestly, I'm not seeing a lot of people with guns on their hips around here. What's new is a state voucher program to help and encourage people take their first gun safety course. Speaking of guns, in Tennessee, teachers are allowed to carry a handgun on public school grounds. It's interesting to note that the shooter of the Covenant Christian School in Nashville had considered shooting up her high school, but decided to go to the grade school instead because the high school had officers with guns. One of the legislators who opposed the bill, Senator London Lamar, is worried that the next school shooter will end up being a teacher. I'm not really worried about that, but I do hope that the school children are protected from access to the guns. A school worker who wants to carry a handgun would need to have a handgun carry permit, have written authorization from both the school's principal and local law enforcement, clear a background check, and undergo 40 hours of handgun training. Speaking of children, extra safeguards have been put in place to make sure that children who have been abused will not be returned to the perpetrators of the abuse. Also, there are additional penalties for placing age 8 or younger children in imminent danger of death, bodily injury, or physical or mental impairment. There was a little 2-year-old boy a few months ago that had gotten his dad's fentanyl, and he passed away from that. So this is to protect those children, or at least punish those who caused harm to their children. One new law will extend the civil statute of limitations for child victims of sex trafficking, allowing them to sue their perpetrators up to 30 years after their 18th birthday. Some of them need the extra time to heal and be brave enough to talk about it. Tennessee hasn't had the death penalty for a while, but current lawmakers want the death penalty allowed for cases involving child rape. I'm sure they're thinking that execution would stop a perpetrator from ever offending again. However, there is some concern that it may make victims afraid to speak up or may incentivize perpetrators to kill their victims. Some domestic violence offenders are required to wear GPS monitoring devices so survivors can tell that when they are nearby. The offender will pay for the service, and the survivors will have a phone app that notifies them if the offenders are near their location. The bill would apply to people arrested for stalking, aggravated stalking, or any kind of offense that's specifically against another person, such as assault, kidnapping, or rape. Okay, here's a controversial one. In Tennessee, a person can be held civilly liable if they recruit, harbor, or transport minors for prohibited medical procedures, even if such procedures are legal in another state. This legislation aims to reinforce parental control over certain healthcare decisions. The procedures in question include gender-affirming surgeries. Tennessee has also criminalized helping minors cross state boundaries to get abortions without their parents' permission. The legal blood alcohol content in Tennessee has been 0.2%, but it's now been lowered to 0.15%. TBI predicts that 85% more people are going to be in trouble. Better get your wraps ready if you're not absolutely sure you should drive. Do you remember when almost all the Canadian truckers went to their capital to protest COVID restrictions? As a punishment and without due process, they lost access to their bank accounts and their cash transfer apps. Tennessee has a new law in response to that type of situation. A person cannot be denied service based on political or religious views, speech, or affiliations, and no social credit score is to be used to determine their eligibility for services. Doing so will be considered an unfair trade practice. The law is aimed at financial institutions and insurers. The Back the Blue Act now mandates harsher penalties, including a minimum sentence of 60 days in prison and a $10,000 fine for assaulting law enforcement officers. Similar penalties apply for assaulting other first responders, such as nurses and firefighters, a $5,000 fine and 30 days in prison. The Lake and Riley Act of 2024 generally prohibits a public institution of higher education from prohibiting adults lawfully present on the institution's property from carrying a non-lethal weapon for purposes of self-defense, with certain exceptions. That means college students are allowed to carry pepper spray, mace, tear gas, a stun gun, a taser, or other type of electronic controlled device for self-defense. You may or may not know that Tennessee has a sales tax holiday. This year is from August 1st through October 31st. The state legislature has agreed to give counties and municipalities tax funds that total the amount they would have normally received during that time. Okay, here's an odd one. It's a Class C felony to steal or control another person's bees or beehive without their permission. It's like little tiny livestock. There are a lot of new laws taking effect in Tennessee, and these are just the ones that I thought were interesting. I'm Leslie Davison, a Middle Tennessee realtor. Follow me for more content pertaining to the Nashville area in Middle Tennessee.